Welcome, dear listener, to a chilling yet soothing journey into the heart of a medieval dungeon, where the shadows of 1300 CE, England whisper tales of torment and endurance. Picture a grim stone fortress, its walls damp with moss, guarding a labyrinth of cells buried deep beneath the earth. The air is heavy with the stench of mold and despair, pierced by the distant screams of prisoners and the skitter of rats in the dark. Torchlight flickers, casting eerie shapes, while the clank of chains and the groan of torture devices echo through the stone. This is the world of Eadric, a peasant accused of stealing a sack of grain, now thrust into a dungeon's merciless grip. As you settle into your cozy haven, let the modern world fade, and allow these ancient shadows to draw you in. Oh, and where are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment to share your corner of the world. Surviving a day in a medieval dungeon was a brutal test. Torture devices that broke the body, darkness that gnawed the mind, rats that carried disease, and screams that shattered hope. Eadric's story, woven through this grim tapestry, reveals why so few could endure the dungeon's horrors. Dim the lights, sink into your pillows, and let the cold stone walls of history guide you into a tale of survival against unimaginable odds. The English countryside in 1300 CE stretches in a patchwork of barley fields and thatched huts, where the morning mist curls like a ghostly veil over the damp earth. Eadric, a peasant with hands roughened by years of ploughing, kneels in his field, the scent of wet soil and wildflowers filling his lungs. His wife, Aliana, sits nearby, her needle flashing as she mends a cloak, her soft humming blending with the distant bleat of sheep. Their son, barely 6, chases a lamb across the village green, his laughter a bright note in the quiet dawn. This is Eadric's world, a simple life tethered to the rhythms of seed and harvest, under the looming shadow of Lord Baldwin's stone fortress on the hill. But today, that world fractures. Hooves pound the dirt path, and 3 of the Lord's men, their chainmail glinting, march toward him with grim purpose. A stolen sack of grain, they claim, points to Eadric, and their accusation is a blade that severs him from his life. As you listen from your cozy, modern haven, let the mist of medieval England fade, drawing you into Eadric's descent into a dungeon where darkness, rats, and the screams of prisoners await. His story is one of sudden loss, mounting dread, and the first steps into a nightmare few could endure. In the England of 1300 CE, during the feudal era, justice was a brutal instrument, wielded by lords with near-absolute power over their tenants. The legal system, rooted in feudal loyalty and divine judgment, offered little recourse for peasants like Eadric. Crimes like theft, poaching, or heresy could lead to swift punishment: flogging, mutilation, or imprisonment in a dungeon's depths. Trials were rare, often replaced by ordeal or the Lord's whim. An accusation alone could condemn a man. Dungeons, carved into the foundations of castles or fortified manors, were not prisons for rehabilitation but holding cells for the accused, debtors, or enemies, designed to break body and spirit. Historical records, such as the assize rolls, and chronicles, like those of Matthew Paris, detail cases of peasants thrown into dungeons for minor offences, their fates left to the Lord's caprice. Eadric, accused of stealing grain to feed his family through a harsh winter, faces this unforgiving system, his innocence a frail defence against the weight of feudal authority. The arrest strikes like a thunderclap. Eadric is pulling weeds, his fingers sunk in the cool earth, when the Lord's men arrive. Their leader, Godric, a burly man with a scarred face, barks the charge. Eadric, son of Wulfric, "You've stolen from Lord Baldwin's stores." The words hit like a blow, Eadric's heart lurching as he stammers a denial. Aliana drops her, sewing, her cries sharp as she rushes to his side, her hands clutching his tunic. The villagers, gathered at the edge of the field, watch in silence, their eyes averted. Knowing resistance could bring the Lord's wrath on them all, men seize Eadric, binding his wrists with coarse rope that cuts into his skin, the knots tight as a noose. Aliana presses a small wooden cross into his palm, its edges worn smooth, her tears hot against his cheek. "Come back to us," she whispers, her voice breaking like brittle straw. Their son wails, his small hands reaching as Eadric is dragged. Away, the fortress's grey walls looming like a storm. Cloud on the horizon, the journey to the dungeon is a march through fear and humiliation. The path winds through the village, past mud-splattered huts and curious stares, the rope chafing Eadric's wrists until they bleed. Children pause their games, their whispers trailing him like ghosts, while elders shake their heads, knowing. The dungeon's reputation, the fortress gates, iron-bound and towering, creak open, swallowing Eadric into a world of stone and shadow. The air inside is damp, heavy with the scent of mildew and old straw, a stark contrast to the open fields he left behind. Godric leads him through a courtyard, past guards sharpening blades and servants scurrying with firewood, their eyes avoiding his. The clank of metal and the murmur of voices fade as they approach a spiral stair, its stone steps descending into the earth like a throat into darkness. Eadric's sandals slip on the slick surface, his bound hands useless, his heart pounding with tales of what lies below the torture devices. Screaming prisoners, rats that gnaw at the living. The descent is a plunge into another realm. The stair, carved from rough stone, spirals tightly, its walls glistening with moss and condensation, the air growing colder with each step. Godric's torch casts flickering shadows, revealing scratches on the wall's names, prayers, desperate marks left by those who came before. The scent shifts to something fouler, rot, unwashed bodies, and the metallic temps of fear. A distant scream, raw and jagged, echoes up the stair, followed by the skitter of rats, their claws scraping stone like tiny knives. Eadric's breath catches his chest tight as the light from above fades, replaced by a suffocating gloom. Historical accounts, like those of chronicler Geoffrey of Monmouth, describe dungeons as places of terror, where prisoners faced not just confinement, but the constant threat of torture axe to stretch limbs, thumbscrews to crush fingers, iron maidens to pierce flesh. Eadric clutches his cross, its wood a fragile anchor, praying to St. Cuthbert for protection, but the dungeon's darkness feels like a living thing, ready to swallow him whole. The corridor at the stair's base is a narrow tunnel of stone, its ceiling low, forcing Eadric to duck. Iron grates line the walls, each guarding a cell from which moans and whispers leak. Godric unlocks one, the hinges groaning like a wounded beast, and shoves Eadric inside. The cell is a coffin of stone, barely 5 feet wide, its floor damp with seeping water and scattered with mouldy straw that reeks of decay. Iron manacles, bolted to the wall, clang as Godric chains Eadric's wrists, the metal cold and sharp, drawing blood where it scrapes his raw skin. The door slams shut, the bolt sliding with a finality that echoes in Eadric's bones. The darkness is near absolute, broken only by a sliver of torchlight from the corridor, too weak to reach the cell's corners. The sounds of the dungeon drips of water, the skitter of rats, the cries of other prisoners fill the void. a relentless assault on his senses. Archaeological evidence from medieval dungeon sites, like the Tower of London or York Castle, paints a grim picture. Cramped cells, often underground, with no windows, minimal ventilation, and floors slick with filth. Chains and manacles, found rusted in excavations, left marks on prisoners' bones, while skeletal remains show signs of malnutrition, infection, and trauma. Eadric feels this reality immediately. The cold stone floor leaches warmth from his body, his thin tunic no shield against the chill. The manacles force him to crouch or lean awkwardly, his shoulders aching within hours, the iron cutting deeper with each shift. The air is thick, each breath heavy with the stench of rot and despair, making his stomach churn. Rats, their eyes glinting in the faint light, scurry closer, their claws brushing his legs, bold in the dark. A scream from a nearby cell, then broken cuts through the silence, a reminder of the torture devices that await. Their names whispered in village tales, the rack, the pair of anguish, the wheel. The psychological toll is immediate and crushing. The darkness disorients, erasing time and space, making minutes stretch into eternity. Eadric's eyes strain for light, but the void conjures shapes ghostly figures, Alina's face, the glint of a jailer's blade that vanish when he blinks. The screams of other prisoners, some pleading for mercy, others incoherent with pain. Gnaw at his sanity, each sound a warning of his own fate. Medieval chronicles describe prisoners driven to madness by isolation and fear, their minds fracturing. Under the dungeon's relentless pressure, Eadric tries to focus on his village, the warmth of his hut, the smell of Alina's bread. But the darkness erodes these memories, replacing them with dread. He grips his cross, its edges digging into his palm, whispering prayers to Saint Cuthbert. But the dungeon's cacophony drowns his words, leaving him alone with his terror. The social dynamics of the dungeon amplify his suffering. Eadric is surrounded by others, yet utterly alone. Their cries are not camaraderie, but shared torment. The jailers, like Godric, hold absolute power, their footsteps a harbinger of pain or meager rations. Eadric hears Godric's voice in the corridor barking at another prisoner, and shrinks against the wall, fearing he'll be next. The feudal hierarchy, rigid and unyielding, places peasants like him at the bottom, their lives worth less than the Lord's grain. Historical records, such as the pipe rolls, show prisoners languishing for months, their fates decided by whim, bribe, or execution, with no hope of a fair trial. Eadric's accusation, true or false, is a sentence in itself, his voice silenced by the Lord's authority and the dungeon's walls. Eadric's first hours are a crucible of body and mind. The cold numbs his fingers, the manacles cut deeper, and the rats grow bolder, their claws scratching his sandals. Hunger claws at his gut, his last meal a distant memory, and the dripping water, foul and gritty, promises sickness. The screams, varied and relentless, some sharp with fresh pain, others dull with despair, prevent rest, his mind teetering on panic. He clings to his cross, praying for Aliana, for his son, for a chance to prove his innocence. Yet the dungeon's reality, its darkness, its vermin, its threat of torture feels like a verdict already passed. As we leave Eadric here, chained, in the dark, the rats circling, the screams echoing, we see a man facing odds that would break most. Ahead lie the terrors of torture, the weight of darkness, and the fight to hold on to hope. Each a challenge that could end him before the day is through. The dungeon beneath Lord Baldwin's fortress in 1300 CE England is a world of stone and shadow, a suffocating tomb where hope withers under the weight of cold, unyielding walls. Eadric, a peasant accused of stealing grain, sits chained in a cell no wider than his outstretched arms, his wrists raw from iron manacles that bite with every movement. The air is thick with the stench of mold and decay, mingled with the faint sour temps of unwashed bodies, a reminder of the countless souls trapped in this darkness. The floor, slick with damp straw and seeping water, chills his bones through, his thin tunic, his body shivering as he curls against the wall. Rats skitter in the gloom, their claws scraping like whispers of dread, while distant screams sharp with pain or broken with despair echo through the stone corridors. The faint flicker of a torch beyond the iron grate offers no warmth, only a cruel tease of light that deepens the cell's oppressive dark. As you listen from your quiet, modern refuge, let the dungeon's cold embrace draw you into Eadric's struggle, where confinement is not just a physical cage, but a relentless assault on body and soul. His story is one of endurance, where survival hangs on a thread in a place designed to break the human spirit. In medieval Europe, dungeons were not mere prisons, but instruments of punishment, carved into the bowels of castles to hold the accused, debtors, or enemies of the Lord. Unlike modern jails, these cells often underground, as seen in archaeological sites like the Tower of London or Pontefract Castle, were designed for suffering, not reform. Cells were cramped, sometimes only 4 or 5 feet wide, with low ceilings that forced prisoners to crouch or lie down. Stone walls, damp with groundwater, fostered mold and disease, while iron chains and manacles restricted movement, leaving marks on bones found in medieval burials. Historical records, such as the Assize Rolls, describe prisoners languishing in these conditions for weeks or months, their bodies weakened by cold, immobility, and starvation. For Eadric, thrown into this dungeon for a crime he swears he didn't commit, the crushing confinement is a brutal introduction to a world where survival is a daily miracle. Eadric's cell is a nightmare of restriction. The walls, rough-hewn stones slick with moisture, press in close, their surface cold and unyielding against his shoulder. The ceiling, barely high enough for him to sit upright, forces him to hunch, his neck aching within hours. The manacles, heavy iron cuffs bolted to the wall, chain his wrists above his head, the metal cutting into his skin, already raw from the ropes of his arrest. Each shift to ease the strain sends a jolt of pain through his arms, the chains clanking like a mocking echo. The floor, a mix of dirt and straw sodden with water, numbs his legs as he sits, his sandals offering no protection from the chill. Archaeological evidence from dungeon excavations reveals bones with signs of osteoarthritis and pressure sores, testaments to the toll of such confinement. Eadric's body, accustomed to the open fields of his village, rebels against this unnatural stillness, his joints stiffening, his muscles cramping, his breath shallow in the stale air. The cold is a relentless enemy. The dungeon, buried deep beneath the fortress, is untouched by the sun's warmth, its stone walls radiating a bone-deep chill that seeps through Eadric's thin wool tunic. His shivers are constant, his teeth chattering as he tries to curl tighter, his knees drawn to his chest. The damp air clings to his skin, his hair matted with moisture, his fingers numb as if dipped in ice. Medieval prisoners often suffered hypothermia, with chronicles noting deaths from exposure in unheated cells. Eadric's breath fogs faintly in the dim light. a reminder of the warmth he left behind in his village, where Alina's hearth glowed with fire and comfort. He presses his wooden cross, tucked beneath his tunic, against his chest, its edges a small comfort against the cold that threatens to sap his strength before the day is out. The darkness compounds the confinement's cruelty. The cell is shrouded in near-total blackness, the torchlight from the corridor a distant sliver that barely reaches the walls. Eadric's eyes strain, desperate for light, but the void offers only shadows that shift and twist, conjuring chains, Alina's face that vanish when he blinks. This sensory deprivation, a hallmark of medieval dungeons, was a weapon in itself, disorienting prisoners and eroding their sense of reality. Historical accounts, like those of chronicler John of Salisbury, describe prisoners hallucinating in the dark, their minds unraveling as time blurred. Eadric tries to count his breaths, to mark the hours, but the darkness swallows time, making each moment stretch into an eternity of waiting, fearing what comes next, torture, starvation, or madness. Rats are a constant presence, their scuttling, a sinister soundtrack to Eadric's confinement. Their claws scratch the straw, their eyes glint like tiny coals in the faint light, and their boldness grows with his stillness. One brushes his ankle, its fur coarse, its weight a sickening pressure, and Eadric jerks, the chains rattling, his heart racing. The rats, thriving in the dungeon's filth, carry fleas and disease, their bites a threat as real as the jailer's whip. Excavations of medieval prisons have uncovered rat bones alongside human remains, evidence of infestations that spread typhus and plague. Eadric swats at the unseen pests, his hands clumsy in the manacles, his skin crawling with the fear of bites that could fester. Like the wounds he's seen on others in his village, swollen and deadly, the screams of other prisoners pierce the cell's isolation, a relentless assault on Eadric's fraying nerves. From somewhere down the corridor, a man's cry rises, sharp and raw, followed by a low moan that trails into silence. Another voice pleads, words garbled by pain or despair, while a third mutters incoherently, as if lost to madness. These sounds, bouncing off the stone walls, are inescapable, each one a reminder of the torture devices that await the rack, stretching limbs until joints pop, thumb screws crushing fingers, or the wheel breaking bones with methodical cruelty. Medieval records, such as the Chronicle of Lenacost, describe dungeons as cacophonies of suffering, where screams drove prisoners to sleeplessness and despair. Eadric presses his hands to his ears, the chains clanking, but the sounds seep through, mingling with his own fear, stealing the rest he desperately needs. The physical toll of confinement is immediate and brutal. Eadric's muscles, once strong from ploughing fields, cramped from immobility, his shoulders burning from the strain of the manacles. The cold floor presses sores into his thighs, the damp straw irritating his skin, already chafed by the iron cuffs. His stomach growls. The memory of his last meal, a crust of bread shared with Aliana, fading against the hunger that claws at him. The dungeon offers no food yet, only a trickle of foul water dripping from the ceiling. Its taste metallic and gritty, promising sickness. Skeletal remains from medieval prisons show signs of malnutrition and pressure ulcers, with bones worn. From prolonged immobility, Eadric shifts, trying to ease the pain, but each movement tightens the manacles, drawing fresh blood. A cycle of discomfort that feels like the dungeon's designed to wear him down, body and soul. The psychological strain is as punishing as the physical. The cramped cell, the darkness, and the screams create a sense of entrapment that gnaws at Eadric's mind. He tries to picture his village, the golden barley under a summer sun, Alina's smile, his son's laughter, but the images blur, overwhelmed by the cell's oppressive reality. Fear of what comes next, jailer's visit, a torture session, or simply endless confinement keeps his heart racing, his breaths shallow. He's heard tales of the rack, its wooden frame groaning, as it stretches bodies, and the Iron Maiden, its spikes piercing flesh, stories that now feel all too real. The darkness amplifies these fears, conjuring visions of pain and death, while the screams remind him he's not alone in his terror, yet utterly isolated. Medieval accounts note prisoners confessing to crimes they didn't commit, broken by the dungeon's psychological weight, their spirits crumbling before their bodies. Eadric's faith is his only anchor, but it's a fragile one. He clutches his wooden cross, its edges worn smooth by years of touch, and whispers prayers to Saint Cuthbert, the patron of his village, begging for strength, for Alina's safety, for a chance to prove his innocence. The prayers feel hollow. In the dungeon's gloom, drowned by the rats' skittering and the prisoner's cries, as if the saints cannot hear him through the stone. Medieval prisoners often turned to faith, as evidenced by crosses and religious symbols scratched into dungeon walls, found in excavations at sites like Carlisle Castle. Eadric tries to recall the priest's sermons, the promise of divine mercy, but the dungeon's cruelty makes the heavens feel distant, his hope a flickering candle in a storm. He hums a hymn from his village, the melody faint and trembling, a small act of defiance against the cell's suffocating grip. The social dynamics of the dungeon deepen Eadric's sense of powerlessness. The jailers, like Godric, are omnipotent here, their footsteps a threat that sends Eadric shrinking against the wall. He hears Godric's voice, gruff and commanding, ordering another prisoner to speak or suffer, and dreads the moment he'll face the same. The feudal hierarchy, rigid and unyielding, places Eadric at its lowest rung, his life worth less than the grain he's accused of stealing. Other prisoners, though close in their suffering, are no allies. Their screams are a shared torment, not a bond. Historical records show prisoners languishing without trial, their fates decided by lords or bribes, with peasants like Eadric having no voice. He wonders if Aliana can plead his case, but the thought of her facing Lord Baldwin's court, alone and powerless, twists his heart. The dungeon's confinement is a calculated assault, designed to break the body and spirit before torture even begins. Eadric's joints ache, his skin chafes, his hunger grows, and the cold numbs his extremities, each sensation a reminder of his fragility. The rats, bolder now, nibble at the straw near his feet, their presence a constant threat of disease. The screams, varying in pitch and desperation, weave a tapestry of suffering that keeps sleep at bay, his mind fraying with each cry. He tries to focus on Aliana, on the cross, on the hope of daylight, but the cell's walls close tighter, the darkness deeper, the sounds louder. As we leave Eadric here, chained and shivering, the rats circling, the screams echoing, the dungeons. Confinement is a crucible that tests every ounce of his endurance. Ahead lie the terrors of torture devices, the weight of unrelenting darkness, and the struggle to cling to sanity. Each a challenge that could end him before the day is done. The dungeon beneath Lord Baldwin's fortress in 1300 CE England is a realm of unrelenting shadow, where the air hangs heavy with the stench of mould, blood, and fear. Eadric, A peasant, chained for alleged theft, crouches in his cramped cell, his wrists bleeding from iron manacles, his body shivering against the damp stone floor. The darkness is a suffocating veil, broken only by the faint flicker of a torch beyond the iron grate, its light casting grotesque shadows that dance like spectres. Rats skitter through the straw, their claws scraping, their eyes glinting with hunger, while the screams of other prisoners, sharp with agony or dull with despair, echo through the stone corridors. Eadric's wooden cross, pressed against his chest, is a frail shield against the terror that grips him. The knowledge that the dungeon's torture devices await, their purpose not just to punish, but to break. The clank of a jailer's boots grows louder, and Eadric's heart pounds, each step a harbinger of pain, as you listen from your quiet, modern sanctuary. Let the dungeon's cold grip pull you into Eadric's world, where the threat of torture devices, the rack, thumbscrews, and worse looms, as a test few could survive. His story is one of dread, pain, and the desperate fight to endure a nightmare designed to shatter body and soul. In medieval Europe, torture was a cornerstone of justice, a tool wielded by lords, church officials, and magistrates to extract confessions, punish crimes, or deter defiance. Dungeons, like those beneath castles such as Pontefract or the Tower of London, were equipped with devices designed to inflict maximum pain without immediate death, ensuring prisoners suffered while still able to speak or scream their guilt. The rack, a wooden frame with ropes and pulleys, stretched limbs until joints dislocated, thumbscrews crushed fingers or toes. The pair of anguish, a metal device inserted into orifices, expanded to tear flesh. Chronicles like those of Matthew Paris and archaeological finds iron restraints. Bone fractures showing unnatural stress confirm their widespread use. Torture was often public, a spectacle to instill fear, but in dungeons it was intimate. A private torment meant to break the accused before trial or execution. For Eadric, accused of stealing grain to feed his starving family, the threat of these devices is a constant shadow, his innocence irrelevant in a system where pain was truth's. Arbiter Eadric's torment begins as the cell door groans open, the sound a knife through the silence. Godric, the burly jailer, stands silhouetted against the torchlight, his face a mask of grim purpose, a leather whip coiled at his belt. "Time to talk, thief," he growls, his voice rough as the stone walls. Eadric's stomach twists, his mouth dry as he stammers a denial, but Godric yanks the chain, dragging him from the cell. The manacles bite deeper, blood trickling down his wrists, his legs trembling from hours of crouching. The corridor, narrow and slick with damp smells, of rust and sweat, the air thick with the moans of other prisoners. Rats scatter as Godric's boots thud, their claws clicking in retreat. But their presence lingers, a reminder of the dungeon's filth. A scream, raw and piercing, erupts from a chamber ahead, and Eadric's heart races, his mind conjuring images of the rack's wooden frame, its ropes taut with the weight of suffering. The torture chamber is a cavern of horrors, lit by a single torch that casts flickering shadows across a grim array of devices. The rack dominates, a massive wooden frame with ropes and a crank, its surface stained with sweat and blood. Nearby, thumbscrews glint on a table, their iron jaws small but menacing, designed to crush bone with a turn of a screw. Chains dangle from the ceiling, their ends fitted with hooks, while a brazier glows with heated irons, their tips red with promise of pain. Historical accounts, like those in the Chronicle of Lenacost, describe such chambers as places where prisoners were broken, their confessions true or false extracted through agony. Eadric's eyes widen, his breath shallow, as Godric shoves him toward the rack, the wood creaking under his weight. "Confess," Godric demands, "or we'll see how long you last." Eadric clutches his cross, whispering to Saint Cuthbert. But the prayer feels fragile against the chamber's menace. The rack is Eadric's first trial. Godric binds his wrists and ankles with coarse ropes, the fibers scraping his already raw skin, and ties them to the rack's pulleys. The jailer turns the crank, and the ropes tighten, pulling Eadric's arms and legs in opposite directions. Pain flares in his shoulders, a burning ache that grows as the crank clicks, each turn stretching his joints. He grits his teeth, his breath hitching, but a scream escapes as a joint pops, the sound sickening in the quiet chamber. The rack's design, documented in medieval texts, was precise. It dislocated joints without tearing muscles, prolonging suffering. Eadric's vision blurs, sweat stinging his eyes, his body trembling as he gasps, "I'm innocent." Godric sneers, turning the crank again, and the pain surges, a white-hot wave that drowns his words. The screams of other prisoners, echoing from nearby cells, mingle with his own, a chorus of anguish that fills the dungeon. The physical toll is immediate and devastating. Eadric's shoulders scream with each pull, his muscles straining, his joints on the edge of tearing. His wrists, already bloodied from manacles, chafe under the ropes, the skin splitting, blood dripping onto the rack's stained wood. His chest heaves, each breath a struggle against the tension, his ribs aching, as if crushed. Archaeological evidence from medieval burials shows skeletons with dislocated shoulders and stress fractures, signs of tortures, lasting marks. Eadric's body, once strong from ploughing fields, feels frail, each movement a fresh agony. The cold of the dungeon, seeping through the stone, chills his sweat-soaked skin, his shivers adding to the pain. The rats, drawn by the scent of blood, skitter closer, their claws clicking, their boldness a threat of bites that could fester into fever. The psychological dread is as crippling as the pain. Eadric's mind races, each crank of the rack a reminder of the torture devices yet to come. Thumbscrews, heated irons, the pair of anguish whispered in village tales as tools of the devil. The darkness of the chamber, lit only by the torch's flickering glow, amplifies his fear, the shadows twisting into shapes of pain and death. The screams of other prisoners, some sharp with fresh torment, others broken with despair, pound against his sanity, each cry a warning of what awaits if he resists. Medieval chronicles note that torture often broke prisoners' spirits before their bodies, with confessions forced not by guilt but by the need to end the pain. Eadric's thoughts spiral to Aliana, to his son, their faces fading under the weight of terror, his resolve crumbling as he wonders if confession true or false might spare him worse. Godric pauses. The rack's crank still, but the reprieve is fleeting. He picks up a thumbscrew, its iron jaws glinting, and clamps it onto Eadric's thumb. The metal bites, a sharp pinch that grows into a crushing agony as Godric twists the screw, the bone grinding under the pressure. Eadric screams, the sound raw, his body jerking against the rack's ropes, the pain a fire that consumes his focus. The thumbscrew, a common device in medieval dungeons, was designed to crush small bones, its simplicity belying its cruelty. Eadric's thumb swells, the skin splitting, blood seeping as he gasps, "I stole nothing." Godric's eyes narrow, unmoved, and he tightens the screw, the crack of bone echoing in Eadric's ears. The screams from other cells grow louder, a reminder that he's one of many. his suffering a note in the dungeon's grim symphony. The torture chamber's atmosphere is a weapon in itself. The air, thick with the stench of blood, sweat, and burning metal from the brazier, chokes Eadric's lungs, each breath a struggle against nausea. The torchlight casts shadows that flicker across the rack, the thumbscrews, the chains, making them seem alive, ready to strike. Rats scurry at the edges, drawn by the blood dripping from Eadric's wounds, their claws a constant threat in the dim light. The screams of other prisoners, some begging for mercy, others lost to madness, weave through the chamber, a relentless assault that prevents rest, erodes hope. Eadric tries to focus on his cross, its wood pressed against his chest, but the pain and noise drown his prayers, leaving only the terror of what comes next. The social dynamics of the dungeon amplify Eadric's suffering. Godric, the jailer, is a figure of absolute power, his presence a constant threat. His voice, cold and commanding, demands confession, his whip cracking against the floor as a warning. Eadric, a peasant at the bottom of the feudal hierarchy, has no voice here, his pleas ignored, his life worth less than the Lord's grain. Other prisoners, though close in their torment, offer no solace. Their screams are a shared nightmare, not a bond. Historical records, like the pipe rolls, show that torture was a routine tool, with prisoners often tortured to death or left broken, their fates decided by lords or church officials. Eadric hears another prisoner's cry, cut short, a chilling silence that suggests death or unconsciousness, and wonders if he'll share that fate. The threat of worse devices looms, a psychological torment as brutal as the physical. Godric gestures to the brazier, where irons glow red, their heat shimmering in the air, and Eadric's heart lurches, imagining the burn of metal on his skin. Tales of the pair of anguish, a device that expands to tear flesh, haunt his thoughts, whispered in his village as a punishment for liars. The rack and thumbscrews are only the beginning, Godric warns, his voice low and menacing, promising worse. If Eadric resists, the anticipation of pain, as much as the pain itself, breaks prisoners, with medieval accounts noting confessions born of fear rather than guilt. Eadric's mind reels, torn between defiance and the desperate wish to end the torment, his innocence, a fading spark in the dungeon's darkness. Eadric's faith, once a lifeline, frays under the strain. He clutches his cross, whispering to Saint Cuthbert, begging for strength to endure, for Aliana and his son to be spared the Lord's wrath. The prayers feel empty, drowned by the screams, the pain, the rats' relentless scuttling. Archaeological finds crosses scratched into dungeon walls. Religious amulets buried with prisoners show how faith was a common refuge, yet often insufficient against the dungeon's horrors. Eadric tries to recall his village's church, the warmth of candlelight, Alina's hand in his, but the images blur, replaced by the rack's creak, the thumbscrew's bite. He hums a hymn, his voice weak, a small act of defiance, but the dungeon's cacophony overwhelms it, leaving him clinging to a fading hope. The physical and psychological toll of torture is relentless. Eadric's body is a map of pain. His shoulders dislocated, his thumb crushed, his wrists bleeding, his muscles trembling from exhaustion. The cold of the chamber, seeping through his sweat-soaked tunic, chills him to the bone, his shivers amplifying the agony. Hunger gnaws, no food offered since his arrest, and the foul water dripping from the ceiling promises disease. The rats, bolder now, nibble at the straw near his feet, their bites a threat of infection. The screams, varying in pitch and desperation, prevent rest, his mind fraying with each cry. As we leave Eadric here, strapped to the rack, the thumbscrew's pain pulsing, the rats circling, and the screams echoing, we see a man pushed to the edge of endurance. Ahead lie the suffocating darkness, the scourge of vermin, and the fight. To hold on to sanity, each a challenge that could break him before the day's end. The dungeon beneath Lord Baldwin's fortress in 1300 CE England is a realm where light is a memory, swallowed by a darkness so thick it feels alive. Eadric, a peasant chained for alleged theft, sits in his cramped cell, his body aching from the rack's torment, his thumb throbbing from the thumbscrew's cruel bite. The stone walls, slick with damp and moss, pressed close, their chill seeping through his tattered tunic, his shivers a constant companion. The air reeks of mold, blood, and the sour stench of despair, each breath heavy with the dungeon's decay. Rats skitter through the straw, their claws scraping like whispers of menace, their eyes glinting in the faint sliver of torchlight that creeps through the iron grate. Screams of other prisoners, some sharp with fresh pain, others dulled by madness, echo through the corridors, a relentless assault on Eadric's fraying nerves. His wooden cross, pressed against his chest, is a fragile tether to hope, but the darkness, vast and unyielding, threatens to drown it. As you listen from your quiet, modern haven, let the dungeon's shadows envelop you, drawing you into Eadric's struggle against a darkness that gnaws at both body and mind. His story is one of disorientation, fear, and the desperate fight to cling to sanity in a place where light and hope are forbidden. In medieval Europe, dungeons were designed to break prisoners, and darkness was one of their most potent weapons. Carved into the foundations of castles like Pontefract or the Tower of London, these underground cells had no windows, no natural light, only the occasional flicker of a torch brought by jailers. This sensory deprivation, documented in chronicles, like those of John of Salisbury, disoriented prisoners, eroding their sense of time and reality. The absence of light caused hallucinations, panic, and despair, with prisoners often confessing to escape the mental torment. Archaeological evidences with no ventilation, bones showing signs of prolonged immobility, confirms the dungeon's harsh conditions, where darkness was as much a punishment as chains or torture. For Eadric returned to his cell after a grueling session on the rack. The oppressive darkness is a new trial, a suffocating force that tests his endurance beyond the physical pain of torture. Eadric's cell is a void, the darkness so complete that his eyes ache from straining for light. The torch in the corridor, barely visible through the grate, casts a faint, mocking glow that outlines the cell's edges but leaves its center black. He blinks, desperate for shapes, but the void offers nothing, only a blankness that seems to pulse with malice. His hands, chained above his head, tremble in the manacles, the iron cutting deeper into his wrists, blood crusting where it meets the cold metal. The straw beneath him, damp and reeking of rot, offers no comfort, its dampness chilling his thighs through his tunic. The darkness amplifies every sensation, the ache in his dislocated shoulders, the throb of his crushed thumb, the cold that numbs his toes. He tries to shift, to ease the strain, but the chains clank, the movement sparking fresh pain. A reminder of the rack's lingering cruelty. The sensory deprivation is immediate and disorienting. Without light, Eadric loses his bearings, the cells, walls blurring into an endless expanse. Time dissolves, minutes stretching into hours, or perhaps only seconds, he cannot tell. His eyes, accustomed to the sunlit fields of his village. Search for patterns, but the darkness conjures phantoms. Alina's face twisted in fear, his son's laughter warped into a scream, the glint of a rat's eyes multiplying into a swarm. Medieval accounts, like those of chronicler Geoffrey of Monmouth, describe prisoners hallucinating in such conditions, seeing visions of demons or loved ones, their minds unraveling as reality frays. Eadric shakes his head, the chains rattling, trying to banish these images, but the darkness clings, a weight that presses against his skull, threatening to pull him into madness. The screams of other prisoners are a constant torment, their sounds amplified by the darkness. From a nearby cell, a man's cry rises, sharp and desperate, as if torn by a heated iron or the pear of anguish, a device whispered to tear flesh from within. Another voice, low and broken, mutters prayers or curses, the words lost in the stone's echo. A third prisoner weeps, the sound a soft, hopeless rhythm that gnaws at Eadric's resolve. These noises, bouncing off the walls, are inescapable, a cacophony that prevents rest and fuels dread. Historical records note that dungeon noise drove prisoners to insomnia and despair, with some begging for silence as much as for freedom. Eadric presses his hands to his ears, the manacles cutting deeper, but the screams seep through, each one a reminder of the torture chamber he's just left, its rack and thumbscrews waiting for his return. Rats, emboldened by the dark, are a relentless menace. Their claws scrape the straw, their squeaks punctuating the prisoner's cries, their bodies brushing Eadric's legs with a sickening weight. In the faint torchlight, their eyes gleam like embers, darting closer as they sense his immobility. One nibbles at his sandal, its teeth sharp, and Eadric kicks weakly, the chains jerking his arms, pain flaring in his shoulders. The rats, thriving in the dungeon's filth, carry fleas that spread typhus and plague, diseases that killed countless prisoners, as evidenced by skeletal remains with signs of infection. Eadric's skin crawls, the memory of a village friend, lost to a festering bite vivid in his mind. He swats at the rats, his movements sluggish, the darkness hiding their numbers, making each scuttle a threat of unseen hordes. The physical toll of the darkness is as punishing as the psychological. The cold, already a torment in his cramped cell, feels sharper without light, as if the absence of sight heightens the chill. Eadric's body shivers uncontrollably, his teeth chattering, his fingers numb as the stone floor leeches his warmth. His dislocated shoulders ache with each tremor, the pain a constant echo of the rack. The damp air, thick with mold, irritates. His throat, each breath a rasp that worsens the cough he's developed from the dungeon's filth. Hunger gnaws, no food offered since his arrest, and the trickle of water from the ceiling, gritty and foul, churns his stomach, promising dysentery. Or worse. Archaeological finds from medieval dungeons' bones, showing hypothermia, malnutrition, and respiratory infections confirm the darkness's deadly impact, weakening prisoners before torture could claim them. The psychological strain is a slow, insidious erosion. Eadric's mind, battered by the rack's pain and the thumbscrew's bite, struggles to hold on to reality. The darkness blurs the line between waking and dreaming, his thoughts spiraling to Aliana and his son, their faces fading into the void. He imagines them in their hut, Alina's hands kneading bread, his son chasing lambs. But the images twist her face contorted in grief, his son lost in the dark. These hallucinations, common in sensory-deprived prisoners, as noted in medieval chronicles, threaten to break him. He tries to count the scratches on the wall, a habit from his first hours. But his fingers fumble in the dark, the marks invisible. The fear of returning to the torture chamber, of facing the pair of anguish or heated irons, consumes him. Each scream from another prisoner a warning of what awaits. Eadric's faith, his last refuge, is tested by the darkness. He clutches his wooden cross, its edges worn smooth, and whispers prayers to Saint Cuthbert, begging for light, for strength, for Alina's safety. The prayers feel hollow, drowned by the rat's squeaks and the prisoner's cries, as if the saints are blind to this underworld. Archaeological evidence, crosses etched into dungeon walls. Religious amulets found with skeletal remains shows prisoners' desperate reliance on faith, yet its fragility in the face of such conditions. Eadric hums a hymn, the melody faint and trembling, a thread to his village's church, where candlelight once warmed his soul. But the darkness swallows the tune, replacing it with the clank of chains, the skitter of rats, the screams that never ceased. The social isolation of the dungeon deepens Eadric's despair. The other prisoners, though close in their suffering, are no allies. Their cries are a shared torment, not a bond. The jailers, like Godric, are omnipotent, their footsteps a threat that sends Eadric shrinking against the wall. He hears Godric's voice, barking orders in the corridor, and dreads the moment he'll return. Perhaps with the rack's crank or a heated iron. The feudal hierarchy, rigid and unyielding, renders Eadric powerless, his peasant status making him less than the grain he's accused of stealing. Historical records, like the assize rolls, describe prisoners languishing without trial, their fates decided by lords, whims or bribes, with no hope for the poor. Eadric wonders if Aliana can plead his case, but the thought of her facing Lord Baldwin's court, alone and vulnerable, twists his heart. The darkness is a calculated torment, as much a weapon as the rack or thumbscrews. It strips Eadric of time, space, and hope, leaving him adrift in a void where fear reigns. His body weakens, the cold and hunger sapping his strength, the rats a constant threat of disease. His mind frays, the screams and hallucinations eroding his grip on reality. The torture chamber's memory a looming dread. He clings to his cross, his prayers, his memories of Aliana, but each feels fainter, swallowed by the dark. As we leave Eadric here, chained in the void, the rats circling, the screams echoing, the darkness is a crucible that tests his very soul. Ahead lie the scourge of Vermin, the cacophony of suffering, and the fight to hold onto sanity, each a challenge that could break him before the day is done. The dungeon beneath Lord Baldwin's fortress in 1300 CE England is a festering pit where filth and darkness breed despair. Eadric, a peasant chained for alleged theft, huddles in his cramped cell, his body racked with pain from the racks, stretching and the thumbscrews crushing bite. The stone walls, slick with damp moss, radiate a chill that numbs his bones. His tattered tunic no shield against the cold. The air is thick with the stench of rot, blood, and unwashed bodies. Each breath a struggle against nausea. The darkness, a suffocating veil, blinds him to all but the faint flicker of torchlight through the iron grate, casting shadows that twist like nightmares. Screams of other prisoners, some sharp with fresh agony, others broken by madness echo. Through the corridors, a relentless assault on his fraying nerves. But it's the rats skittering through the mouldy straw, their claws scraping, their eyes glinting like malevolent stars, that haunt Eadric most. Their bites threaten disease, their presence a constant terror in the dungeon's gloom. As you listen from your quiet, modern haven, let the dungeon's pestilent air draw you into Eadric's struggle, where vermin are not just pests, but harbingers of death. His story is one of revulsion, fear, and the desperate fight to survive a scourge that gnaws at both body and soul. In medieval Europe, dungeons were breeding grounds for vermin, their damp, filthy conditions a haven for rats, fleas, and lice. Cells, like those excavated at York Castle or the Tower of London, were often underground, with no ventilation, their floors littered with rotting straw and human waste. Rats thrived in this squalor, feeding on scraps, clothing, and even sleeping prisoners, their bites spreading diseases like typhus and plague. Archaeological evidence rat bones found alongside human remains, skeletons showing signs of infection confirms the deadly toll. Fleas and lice, carried by rats and prisoners alike, multiplied in the unwashed confines, their bites causing relentless itching and festering wounds. Medieval chronicles, such as the Chronicle of Lenacost, describe prisoners succumbing to fever and infection, their bodies weakened by vermin before torture or starvation could claim them. For Eadric, still reeling from the torture chamber, the rats and vermin are a new torment, a relentless threat that makes every moment in the dungeon a battle for survival. Eadric's cell is a vermin's paradise, its damp straw a breeding ground for pests. The rats are everywhere, their claws scratching the floor, their squeaks piercing the darkness like tiny screams. In the faint torchlight, their eyes gleam, darting closer as they sense his immobility. One brushes his leg, its fur coarse, its weight a sickening pressure, and Eadric jerks, the manacles cutting deeper into his wrists, pain flaring in his dislocated shoulders. The movement scatters the rat, but others take its place, their boldness growing in the dark. Fleas, too small to see but impossible to ignore, crawl across his skin, their bites a fiery itch that spreads from his arms to his neck. Lice burrow into his hair, their presence a constant irritation, his scalp burning as he scratches with chained hands. The dungeon's filth, documented in medieval records, was a perfect storm for vermin, with prisoners' unwashed bodies and meager rations attracting swarms that carried death in their bites. The physical danger of vermin is immediate. A rat nibbles at Eadric's sandal, its teeth grazing his skin, and he kicks weakly, the chains rattling, his thumb throbbing from the thumbscrew's earlier crush. The bite, shallow but sharp, swells within hours, the skin red and hot, a sign of infection in a place where wounds fester quickly. Medieval dungeons were notorious for disease, with typhus and plague rampant due to fleas carried by rats. Skeletal remains from prison sites show signs of osteomyelitis bone infections from untreated bites and septicemia, a deadly blood poisoning. Eadric knows the danger, having seen a village friend die from a festering rat bite. His body swollen and fevered, he swats at the rats, his movements sluggish from pain and hunger, but the darkness hides their numbers. Each scuttle a threat of another bite, another step toward death. The psychological horror of vermin is as crippling as the physical. The rats' constant presence, their claws and squeaks a relentless assault, keeps Eadric on edge, his heart racing with every brush of fur. In the darkness, their movements are magnified, each sound conjuring images of a swarm overwhelming him, their teeth sinking into his flesh. The fleas and lice, though smaller, are no less tormenting. Their bites a constant irritation that prevents rest, his skin crawling with the sensation of being consumed. Medieval accounts describe prisoners driven to panic by vermin, some scratching themselves bloody, others hallucinating swarms in the dark. Eadric's mind, already frayed by the rack's pain and the dungeon's darkness, struggles to hold steady. The rat's eyes, glinting like demons in his fevered thoughts. He imagines them gnawing at his wounds, a vision that sends shivers through his aching body. The screams of other prisoners amplify the terror, their cries weaving through the rats, skittering like a grim chorus. A man's scream, sharp and raw, suggests the rack or a heated iron, while another's low moan speaks of prolonged suffering, perhaps from infection or despair. The sounds, bouncing off the stone walls, blend with the vermin's noises, creating a cacophony that drowns Eadric's thoughts. He tries to hum a village hymn, its melody a tether to Aliana and his son. But the rat's squeaks and prisoners' cries overwhelm it, stealing the comfort of memory. Historical records note that dungeon noise, combined with vermin, drove prisoners to insomnia and madness, their minds breaking under the relentless assault. Eadric presses his hands to his ears, the manacles cutting deeper, but the sounds persist. Each rat scuttle a reminder of the dungeon's unrelenting cruelty. The dungeon's filth fuels the vermin's reign. The straw, sodden with water and waste, is a breeding ground, its stench choking Eadric's lungs, each breath a struggle against nausea. The walls, slick with mold, harbor fleas that leap onto his skin, their bites multiplying until his arms and legs burn with itch. Lice cling to his hair, their eggs matting his scalp, the sensation maddening as he scratches with chained hands, drawing blood. The rats feed on crumbs of mouldy bread left by jailers, their boldness a sign of the dungeon's neglect. Excavations of medieval prisons reveal layers of filth, human waste, rotting food, rat droppings that made sanitation impossible, turning cells into death traps. Eadric's cell, with no ventilation, traps the stench and pests, his body a canvas for their torment, his wounds a magnet for infection. The risk of disease is a constant shadow. The bite on Eadric's foot, now swollen and hot, pulses with pain, a sign of infection that could turn deadly. Typhus, spread by fleas, brings fever and delirium, while plague, carried by rats, kills swiftly. As seen in medieval outbreaks that decimated prison populations, Eadric's cough, worsened by the damp air and mold, rattles his chest, each hack weakening his already frail body. Hunger, unrelieved since his arrest, saps his strength, making him less able to fight infection. The foul water dripping from the ceiling, gritty with dirt, offers no relief, its taste a promise of dysentery. Medieval records, like those of the Black Death's early spread, show prisoners dying in droves from vermin-borne diseases, their bodies too weak to resist. Eadric's fear of fever, of dying alone in the dark, grows with each bite, each itch. Each rat that dares closer, Eadric's faith, his last refuge, frays under the vermin's assault. He clutches his wooden cross, its edges digging into his palm, and whispers prayers to St. Cuthbert, begging for protection from the rats, from disease, from the dungeon's horrors. The prayers feel hollow, drowned by the squeaks and screams, as if the saints cannot see this pestilent underworld. Archaeological finds amulets and crosses scratched into dungeon walls show prisoners' desperate reliance on faith. Yet its fragility in such conditions. Eadric tries to recall his village's church, the warmth of candlelight, Alina's hand in his but the rat's claws, and the flea's bites pull him back, the darkness warping his memories into nightmares. He hums a hymn, its melody faint. but a rat's sudden scamper across his leg breaks the tune, his voice faltering into a sob. The social isolation of the dungeon deepens the vermin's terror. The other prisoners, though close in their suffering, offer no comfort. Their screams are a shared nightmare, not a bond. The jailers, like Godric, are distant tyrants, their footsteps a threat of torture or meager rations. Eadric hears Godric's voice in the corridor, barking at another prisoner, and shrinks against the wall, fearing a return to the rack or thumb. The feudal hierarchy, unyielding, renders him powerless, his peasant status making him prey to both vermin and lord. Historical records, like the pipe rolls, describe prisoners languishing without trial, their bodies ravaged by disease before justice was served. Eadric thinks of Aliana pleading his case, but the thought of her facing Lord Baldwin's court, alone and vulnerable, twists his gut worse than hunger. The vermin are a relentless scourge, a torment that weaves through every aspect of Eadric's suffering. The rats, with their gnawing teeth and disease-carrying fleas, threaten his body, while their constant presence erodes his mind. The fleas and lice, their bites a fiery itch, prevent rest, their numbers overwhelming in the dark. The screams, blending with the rat's squeaks, keep Eadric on edge, his sanity fraying with each sound. His body weakens, the bite on his foot festering, his cough worsening, his hunger a constant ache. As we leave Eadric here, chained in the dark, the rats circling, the fleas biting, the screams echoing. The vermin are a crucible that tests his endurance to its limits. Ahead lie the cacophony of suffering, the pangs of starvation, and the fight to hold on to sanity, each a challenge that could break him before the day is done. The dungeon beneath Lord Baldwin's fortress in 1300 CE England is a labyrinth of despair, where every sound is a wound to the soul. Eadric, a peasant chained for alleged theft, crouches in his cramped cell, his body battered from the racks, stretching, his thumb crushed by thumbscrews, his skin itching from flea bites. The stone walls, slick with damp moss, press close, their chill seeping through his tattered tunic, his shivers relentless. The air thick with the stench of rot, and blood chokes his lungs, each breath a struggle against the dungeon's filth. The darkness, a suffocating void, blinds him. The faint torchlight through the iron grate, a cruel tease that deepens the shadows. Rats skitter through the mouldy straw, their claws scraping, their eyes glinting like tiny demons, but it's the screams of other prisoners, sharp with agony, low with despair, or wild with madness that cut deepest. These cries, echoing through the stone corridors, are a relentless assault, stealing sleep, fraying sanity, and amplifying Eadric's terror. As you listen from your quiet, modern sanctuary, let the dungeon's cacophony envelop you, drawing you into Eadric's struggle against a soundscape of suffering that threatens to break him. His story is one of endurance, where the screams of others become a mirror to his own fear. A torment as brutal as any torture device in medieval Europe. Dungeons were not just places of physical confinement, but arenas of psychological torment, where the screams of prisoners were as much a punishment as chains or racks. Cells, like those excavated at York Castle or the Tower of London, were packed close, their stone walls amplifying every sound cries of pain. Pleas for mercy, mutterings of madness. Chronicles, such as those of John of Salisbury, describe dungeons as cacophonous hells, where the noise of torture and despair drove prisoners to insomnia and mental collapse. The screams, often sparked by devices like the rack, heated irons, or the pair of anguish, were a constant reminder of impending suffering, designed to break spirits before bodies. For Eadric, still reeling from the torture chamber and the darkness's grip, the screams are a new ordeal, a sonic assault that makes every moment a battle to hold on to his mind. The screams begin as soon as Eadric is thrown back into his cell, the iron door slamming shut with a clang that reverberates in his chest. The darkness swallows him, but the sounds pierce through a man's cry, raw and jagged, as if torn by a heated iron. A woman's sob, soft and broken, pleading for release. Another voice, incoherent, muttering prayers or curses to unseen gods. The noises bounce off the stone walls, overlapping, growing louder, a relentless wave that drowns out thought. Eadric presses his hands to his ears, the manacles cutting into his bloodied wrists. But the screams seep through, each one a blade, to his fraying nerves. He tries to focus on Alina's voice, her gentle humming in their village hut. But the dungeon's cacophony overwhelms it, replacing her melody with a chorus of agony. The variety of screams is a torment in itself. Some are sharp, bursting, from the torture chamber where the rack stretches limbs or thumbscrews crush bones, their pitch high with fresh pain. Others are low, drawn-out moans, the sound of prisoners broken by days of confinement, their spirits leaking into the dark. A few are wild, incoherent shrieks, the mark of minds shattered by the dungeon's horror's darkness, vermin, or the memory of torture. Historical accounts, like the Chronicle of Lenacost, describe prisoners driven to madness by such noise, some confessing to crimes they didn't commit just to silence the screams, if only for a moment. Eadric, his body aching from the rack, his thumb throbbing, feels each cry like a physical blow. A reminder that his own screams joined this chorus hours ago, and may again. The lack of silence is a weapon. In Eadric's village, night brought quiet the rustle of leaves, the crackle of a hearth, Alina's soft breathing beside him. Here, there is no reprieve, no pause to gather strength. The screams come in waves, unpredictable, some fading into whimpers, others rising to new heights of agony. A man's cry cuts off abruptly, replaced by a chilling silence that suggests death or unconsciousness, only for another voice to take its place, pleading for mercy. The stone walls, unyielding and smooth, amplify the sounds, turning the dungeon into an echo chamber where every noise is magnified. Eadric tries to sleep, his body desperate for rest, but the screams jolt him awake, his heart racing, his mind unable to find peace. Medieval records note that insomnia was common in dungeons, with prisoners' health collapsing from lack of sleep, their minds fraying under the relentless noise. The psychological toll is devastating. The screams are not just noise, but a mirror. To Eadric's own fears, the rack's pain, the thumbscrew's bite, the rat's gnawing, all reflected in the cries of others. Each scream conjures images of the torture chamber, its wooden frame stained with blood, its brazier glowing with heated irons. He imagines the pair of anguish, a device whispered in his village to tear flesh, and wonders if the shrieking prisoner nearby endured it. The darkness, already a torment, makes the screams more vivid, each sound painting a picture of suffering in his mind. Chronicles describe prisoners hallucinating under such conditions, hearing their own names in the cries, or seeing loved ones in their torment. Eadric's thoughts spiral to Aliana and his son, their faces twisted in the screams, a vision that sends his heart pounding, his breaths shallow in the damp air. The rats, ever present, weave their own torment into the cacophony. Their claws scrape the straw, their squeaks blending with the prisoner's cries, creating a layered assault on Eadric's senses. A rat scurries over his leg, its weight a sickening jolt. And he kicks weakly, the chains rattling, pain flaring in his dislocated shoulders. The fleas biting his skin, the lice crawling in his hair, add their own irritation, their tiny noises a counterpoint to the screams. The rats, drawn by the dungeon's filth, are bolder in the dark, their eyes glinting in the faint torchlight, their teeth grazing Eadric's sandal where a bite already festers, hot and swollen. Archaeological evidence rat bones, human skeletons with infection marks confirms the vermin's role in spreading disease, with typhus and plague claiming. Countless prisoners. Eadric's fear of infection grows, each rat's scuttle a threat of fever, each scream a reminder of those who fell to disease before torture could claim them. The physical toll of the noise compounds Eadric's suffering, his body already weakened by torture and hunger, craves sleep, but the screams prevent it, his eyes heavy, his mind foggy. The cold stone floor, damp with seeping water, chills his bones, his shivers amplifying the pain in his shoulders and thumb. His cough, worsened by the mouldy air, rattles his chest, each hack stealing what little strength remains. Hunger gnaws. No food offered since his arrest, and the foul water dripping from the ceiling, gritty with dirt, promises dysentery. The screams, relentless and varied, keep his heart racing, his muscles tense, his body unable to relax. Skeletal remains from medieval dungeons show signs of stress-related ailments, sworn teeth from grinding, bones thinned by malnutrition of the physical cost of such conditions. Eadric's body, once strong from ploughing fields, feels frail, each scream a drain on his dwindling reserves. Eadric's faith, his only anchor, frays under the sonic assault. He clutches his wooden cross, its edges digging into his palm, and whispers prayers to Saint Cuthbert, begging for silence, for strength, for Alina's safety. The prayers are drowned by a prisoner's scream, sharp as a blade, followed by the rat's squeaks, a chorus that mocks his faith. Archaeological finds crosses scratched into dungeon walls. Amulets, buried with prisoners, show faith as a common refuge, yet often powerless against the dungeon's horrors. Eadric tries to hum a hymn, its melody a tether to his villages. Church, where candlelight warmed his soul. But a sudden shriek from a nearby cell breaks the tune, his voice faltering into a sob. The screams, relentless, make the heavens feel distant, as if the saints are deaf to this underworld's suffering. The social isolation of the dungeon deepens the scream's impact. The other prisoners, though close in their torment, are no allies. Their cries are a shared nightmare, not a bond. Eadric hears a man plead for his family, his voice echoing Alina's last words, "Come back to us," and the similarity twists his heart, a reminder of what he's lost. The jailers, like Godric, are distant tyrants. Their footsteps are threat of torture or meager rations. Eadric flinches at the sound of Godric's boots, fearing a return to the rack or the glint of a heated iron. The feudal hierarchy, unyielding, renders him powerless, his peasant status making him prey to both screams and lords. Historical records, like the pipe rolls, describe prisoners languishing without trial, their minds broken by noise and fear before justice was served. Eadric thinks of Aliana pleading his case, but the thought of her facing Lord Baldwin's court, alone and vulnerable, is a pain sharper than the rack. The screams are a calculated torment, a weapon as brutal as any torture device. They steal sleep, erode sanity, and amplify Eadric's dread of the dungeon's other horrors: darkness, rats, starvation. Each cry is a reminder of the racks, pain, the rat's bites, the darkness's grip, weaving a tapestry of suffering that traps him in a cycle of fear. His body weakens, his cough worsening, his hunger growing, his wounds festering. His mind frays, the screams blending with hallucinations of Alina's voice, his son's cries, the dungeon's walls closing in. As we leave Eadric here, chained, in the dark, the screams echoing, the rats skittering, the cacophony is a crucible that tests his very soul. Ahead lie the pangs of starvation, the psychological breaking point, and the fight to hold on to hope, each a challenge that could break him before the day is done. The dungeon beneath Lord Baldwin's fortress in 1300 CE England is a pit of despair, where every breath is a battle against the weight of suffering. Eadric, a peasant chained for alleged theft, huddles in his cramped cell, his body racked from the racks stretching, his thumb crushed by thumbscrews, his skin inflamed from flea bites. The stone walls, slick with damp moss, radiate a chill that numbs his bones. His tattered tunic a feeble barrier against the cold, the air thick with the stench of rot, blood, and unwashed bodies chokes his lungs, each inhale a struggle against nausea. The darkness, an unyielding void, blinds him. The faint torchlight through the iron grate, a cruel mockery that deepens the shadows. Rats skitter through the mouldy straw, their claws scraping, their eyes glinting like malevolent sparks, while screams of other prisoners sharp with agony or dull with madness echo through the corridors, shredding his nerves. But now a new torment grips Eadric, hunger, a gnawing ache that hollows his stomach, and the foul water that promises sickness more than relief. As you listen from your quiet, modern haven, let the dungeon's deprivation draw you into Eadric's struggle, where starvation and tainted sustenance threaten to break him. His story is one of desperation, weakness, and the fight to survive a place where even survival's scraps come at a cost in medieval Europe. Dungeons were not designed to sustain life, but to punish it, and food and water were often withheld, or barely provided. Cells, like those excavated at Pontefract Castle or the Tower of London, were filthy, their floors strewn with rotting straw and waste, making any sustenance a vector for disease. Prisoners received meagre rations, mouldy bread, rancid gruel, or nothing at all, barely enough to stave off death. Water, often collected from dripping ceilings or stagnant buckets, was contaminated with dirt, waste, or worse, spreading dysentery and other infections. Historical records, such as the pipe rolls, describe prisoners begging for scraps, their bodies wasting from malnutrition, while skeletal remains show signs of starvation-thinned bones, worn teeth, and infections from weakened immune systems. For Eadric, still reeling from torture, darkness, and vermin, the lack of food and clean water is a new crucible, a slow death that tests his body's limits and erodes his will to endure. Eadric's hunger is a living thing, a clawing beast in his gut that grows with each hour. His last meal, a crust of bread shared with Aliana in their village hut, is a distant memory, its warmth and comfort mocked by the dungeon's cold. His stomach cramps, sharp spasms that double him over, the manacles cutting deeper into his wrists as he shifts against the chains. The cold stone floor, damp with seeping water, chills his already weakened body, his shivers amplifying the hunger's bite. He tries to recall the taste of Alina's barley stew, the way it warmed his throat, but the memory only sharpens the ache, his mouth dry, his tongue heavy with thirst. Medieval prisoners often went days without food, their bodies consuming, muscle and fat, leaving them frail and vulnerable to disease. Eadric's strength, once built from ploughing fields, fades, his arms trembling, his legs numb from crouching, each movement a reminder of his body's betrayal. The dungeon offers no reprieve, only a cruel imitation of sustenance. Hours after his return from the torture chamber, the cell door groans open, and a jailer, not Gotrek, but a gaunt man with a pockmarked face, tosses a crust of bread onto the straw. The bread, speckled with green mold, lands near a rat, which darts forward, its teeth sinking into the crust before Eadric can move. He lunges, the chains jerking his arms, pain flaring in his dislocated shoulders, and snatches the bread, brushing off the rat's bite marks. The crust is hard, its surface slimy, its taste bitter with mold, but hunger drives him to chew, each bite a struggle against nausea. Archaeological evidence from medieval prisons shows bread remnants laced with mold and dirt, a staple that often carried disease. Eadric gags, his stomach roiling, but forces the bread down, knowing it may be his only meal for days. Water is an even graver threat. A trickle drips from the cell's ceiling, pooling in a shallow hollow in the floor, its surface cloudy with grit and slime. Eadric scoops it with his hands, the manacles restricting his reach, the water cold and gritty against his lips. Its taste is metallic, tinged with the dungeon's decay, and his throat tightens, his stomach churning with the certainty of sickness. Medieval dungeons, lacking sanitation, were notorious for contaminated water, with chronicles like those of Matthew Paris noting prisoners dying of dysentery from drinking it. Eadric knows the risk, having seen a village neighbor waste away from fever after drinking from a tainted well, but thirst leaves him no choice. He sips, gagging, the water a poison he must swallow to survive, each drop a gamble between hydration and disease. The physical toll of starvation is relentless. Eadric's body, already battered by torture and weakened by cold, begins to waste, his muscles shrinking, his skin taut over his ribs. His dislocated shoulders ache with every movement, the pain sharper as hunger saps his strength. His thumb, crushed by thumbscrews, throbs, the swelling worsened by the lack of nourishment to heal it. His cough, born of the dungeon's mouldy air, grows harsher, each hack stealing breath and energy. Skeletal remains from medieval prisons show signs of malnutrition, bones thinned, teeth worn from grinding, joints eroded by stressivation's toll. Eadric's vision blurs, his head light from hunger, his heart racing with the effort to stay alert. The rats, drawn by the bread's crumbs, skitter closer, their claws grazing his legs. Their bites a threat of infection that his weakened body can't fight. The psychological despair of starvation is as crushing as the physical. Hunger clouds Eadric's mind, making every thought sluggish, his memories of Aliana and his son fading into a haze. He tries to picture their hut, the smell of fresh bread, the warmth of their hearth, but the images blur, replaced by the dungeons. Darkness, the screams, the rat's glinting eyes, the bread's mouldy taste lingers, a reminder of his desperation, while the foul water's aftertaste fuels his fear of fever. Medieval accounts describe prisoners driven to madness by hunger, some hallucinating feasts, others confessing to crimes to earn a scrap of food. Eadric's thoughts spiral to the torture chamber, the rack's pain, the thumbscrew's bite, and he wonders if confession true or false might bring a meal, a fleeting relief from this torment. The screams of other prisoners weave through, the hunger's grip amplifying Eadric's despair. A man's cry, sharp with the rack's pull, echoes from the corridor, followed by a woman's sob, pleading for her children. Another voice, low and incoherent, mutters prayers or curses, a sound of a mind broken by suffering. These cries, bouncing off the stone walls, blend with the rat squeaks and the drip of foul water, creating a cacophony that steals any chance of rest. Eadric presses his hands to his ears, the manacles cutting deeper, but the screams pierce through, each one a reminder of his own pain, his own fear of returning to the torture chamber. Historical records, like the Chronicle of Scourge, note that noise and hunger together drove prisoners to insomnia and despair, their spirits breaking before their bodies. Eadric tries to hum a village hymn, its melody a tether to hope, but a sudden scream drowns it, his voice faltering into silence. The rats, ever present, make hunger a crueler torment. Drawn by the bread's crumbs, they swarm the cell, their claws scraping, their teeth nibbling at the straw near Eadric's feet. One bites his sandal, its teeth grazing his skin, and he kicks weakly, pain flaring in his shoulders, the chains rattling. The bite, already festering from earlier, swells hotter, a sign of infection that hunger weakens him against fleas and lice, thriving in the dungeon's filth, add their own torment. Their bites a fiery itch that prevents rest, his skin raw from scratching. Archaeological evidence, rat bones, human remains with infection, marks confirms the vermin's role in spreading disease, with typhus and plague claiming prisoners weakened by starvation. Eadric's fear of fever grows, each rat scuttle a threat, each bite a step toward death in this pestilent cell. The foul water's threat looms as large as hunger. Each sip, gritty and sour, churns Eadric's stomach, the risk of dysentery. A shadow over every swallow. He knows the signs, cramps, fever, weakness from a villager who died after drinking tainted water, his body wasting in days. The dungeon's water, pooling in filthy hollows, is a breeding ground for disease, its surface shimmering with unseen horrors. Medieval records describe prisoners dying of diarrhea and fever, their bodies unable to fight infection without food. Eadric's cough worsens, his chest tight, his body trembling with the effort to stay upright. The hunger and thirst form a vicious cycle, each weakening him further. His body a fragile shell against the dungeon's assaults. Eadric's faith, his last anchor, frays under the weight of starvation. He clutches his wooden cross, its edges digging into his palm, and whispers prayers to Saint Cuthbert, begging for food, for strength, for Alina's safety. The prayers feel empty, drowned by the screams, the rat squeaks, the drip of foul water, as if the saints cannot hear him in this underworld. Archaeological finds crosses etched into dungeon walls, amulets buried with prisoners show faith as a desperate refuge, yet often powerless against hunger's grip. Eadric tries to recall his village's church, the taste of communion bread, Alina's hand in his butt. The hunger blurs these memories, replacing them with the mouldy crust's bitterness, the water's metallic sting. He hums a hymn, its melody, faint but a prisoner's scream, sharp with pain, breaks it, his voice dissolving into a sob. The social isolation of the dungeon deepens the torment of hunger. The other prisoners, though close in their suffering, offer no solace. Their screams are a shared nightmare, not a bond. Eadric hears a man plead for food, his voice echoing his own hunger, and the similarity twists his heart, a reminder of what he's lost. The jailers, like the gaunt, pockmarked man, are distant tyrants, their footsteps a threat of torture or a cruel toss of mouldy bread. Eadric flinches at the sound of boots, fearing Godric's return with the rack or heated irons. The feudal hierarchy, unyielding, renders him powerless, his peasant status making him prey to both hunger and lords. Historical records, like the assize rolls, describe prisoners languishing without trial, their bodies ravaged by starvation before justice was served. Eadric thinks of Aliana pleading his case, but the thought of her facing Lord Baldwin's court, alone and vulnerable, is a pain sharper than hunger. The starvation and tainted sustenance are a calculated torment, as brutal as any torture device. Hunger weakens Eadric's body, making every pain his dislocated shoulders, his crushed thumb, his festering bite more acute. The foul water threatens disease, each sip a gamble that could end him. The screams, rats, and darkness weave through. This deprivation, stealing rest, fraying sanity, amplifying despair. His body wastes, his mind falters, his faith dims, each moment a step closer to breaking. As we leave Eadric here, chained in the dark, the mouldy bread gone, the foul water dripping, the screams echoing. Starvation is a crucible that tests his very soul. Ahead lie the psychological breaking point, the fight for survival, and the faint hope of escape. Each a challenge that could end him before the day is done. The dungeon beneath Lord Baldwin's fortress in 1300 CE England is a crucible of despair, where every moment erodes the soul. Eadric, a peasant chained for alleged theft, cowers in his cramped cell, his body broken by the racks stretching, his thumb crushed by thumbscrews, his skin inflamed from flea bites, and his stomach hollowed by starvation. The stone walls, slick with damp moss, radiate a chill that numbs his bones, his tattered tunic no shield against the cold. The air, thick with the stench of rot, blood, and waste, chokes his lungs, each breath a rasp worsened by a relentless cough. The darkness, a suffocating void, blinds him. The faint torchlight through the iron grate, a cruel tease that deepens the shadows. Rats skitter through the mouldy straw, their claws scraping, their bites festering, while screams of other prisoners, sharp with agony, low with despair, or wild with madness, pierce his fraying mind. Hunger gnaws, the foul water he sips threatens fever, and now the cumulative weight of these torments, torture, darkness, vermin, noise, and starvation pushes Eadric to the edge of sanity. As you listen from your quiet, modern haven, let the dungeon's despair envelop you, drawing you into Eadric's struggle against a psychological breaking point that threatens to shatter him. His story is one of desperation, where the mind's collapse is as deadly as any physical wound. In medieval Europe, dungeons were designed to break the spirit as much as the body. Their horrors, darkness, noise, vermin, starvation, and torture crafting. A psychological torment that drove prisoners to madness or surrender. Chronicles, like those of Geoffrey of Monmouth, describe prisoners confessing to crimes they didn't commit, their minds broken by fear and isolation, while archaeological evidence scratched messages on cell walls, bones showing signs of the mental toll, sensory deprivation, relentless noise, and the constant threat of pain created a perfect storm, with prisoners hallucinating, losing sense of time, or succumbing to despair. For Eadric, battered by the rack, haunted by screams, and weakened by hunger, the dungeon's cumulative horrors converge, each torment feeding a growing sense of hopelessness that threatens to unravel his mind. Eadric's cell is a tomb of despair, its darkness a weight that presses against his skull. The stone walls, cold and slick, seem to close in, their dampness seeping into his bones, his shivers a constant ache. The manacles, cutting into his bloodied wrists, force him to crouch, his dislocated shoulders throbbing with each movement. his crushed thumb pulsing with pain. The air, thick with mold and decay, irritates his cough, each hack stealing breath and strength. The faint torchlight, barely reaching the cell, casts shadows that twist into phantom Zelina's face, distorted. In grief, his son, lost in the dark, or the rack's wooden frame, waiting to claim him again. He blinks, desperate to banish these visions, but the darkness clings, a void that blurs reality and nightmare, making every moment a struggle to hold on to his mind. The screams of other prisoners are a relentless assault, each cry a shard in Eadric's fracturing psyche. A man's scream, sharp and raw, echoes from the torture chamber, the sound of a heated iron or the pair of anguish tearing flesh. A woman's sob, soft and broken, pleads for her children, echoing Eadric's own fears for Aliana and his son. Another voice, incoherent and wild, mutters prayers or curses, a sign of a mind lost to the dungeon's horrors. These sounds, amplified by the stone walls, weave a tapestry of suffering that drowns Eadric's thoughts, stealing any chance of rest. Historical records, like the Chronicle of Lenacost, note that such noise drove prisoners to insomnia and madness, some scratching their own skin in desperation. Eadric presses his hands to his ears, the manacles cutting deeper, but the screams pierce through, each one a reminder of his own pain, his own fear of returning to the torture chamber. The rats, ever present, add to the psychological strain. Their claws scrape the straw, their squeaks blending with the prisoner's cries, their eyes glinting in the faint light like malevolent stars. One scurries over Eadric's leg, its weight a sickening jolt, and he kicks weakly, pain flaring in. His shoulders, the chains rattling, the bite on his foot, festering and hot, pulses with infection, a constant reminder of the vermin's threat. Fleas and lice, crawling across his skin, burn with each bite, their numbers overwhelming in the dark. Medieval accounts describe prisoners, hallucinating swarms of vermin, their minds conjuring horrors from the constant irritation. Eadric's thoughts spiral, the rats' movements becoming a horde in his mind, their teeth gnawing at his flesh, a vision that sends his heart racing, his breaths shallow in the damp air. Starvation deepens the mental fog. Eadric's hunger, a clawing beast in his gut, clouds his thoughts, making every memory sluggish. The mouldy bread he choked down hours ago, stolen from a rat's jaws, sits heavy in his stomach, its bitter taste a mockery of nourishment. The foul water, gritty and sour, threatens dysentery, each sip a gamble that worsens his fear of fever. His body wastes, his muscles shrinking, his ribs stark under his skin, his strength fading with each hour. Skeletal remains from medieval dungeons show signs of malnutrition, thinned bones, worn teeth, evidence of starvation's toll. Eadric's vision blurs, his head light, his thoughts drifting to Alina's barley stew, the warmth of their hearth. But the images fade, replaced by the dungeon's reality, the cold, the screams, the rat's relentless scuttle, the cumulative horror torture, darkness, vermin, screams, and hunger push Eadric toward a breaking point. His mind, once sharp with memories of his village, frays under the strain, each torment feeding a growing despair. He tries to recall Alina's face, her gentle smile, but the darkness twists it into a scream, her voice blending with the prisoner's cries. His son's laughter, once a beacon, warps into a sob, echoing the woman's pleas down the corridor. These hallucinations, common in medieval prisoners, as noted in chronicles, are a sign of his mind's unraveling. He scratches at the wall, a habit from his first hours, hoping to mark time. but his fingers fumble in the dark, the stone unyielding, his efforts futile. The fear of returning to the torture chamber, of facing the rack or heated irons, consumes him, each scream a warning of what awaits. Eadric's faith, his last tether, is a fragile thread. He clutches his wooden cross, its edges digging into his palm, and whispers prayers to St. Cuthbert, begging for strength, for Alina's safety, for a spark of hope. The prayers feel hollow, drowned by the screams, the rat's squeaks, the drip of foul water, as if the saints are blind to this underworld. Archaeological finds crosses etched into dungeon walls. Amulets buried with prisoners show faith as a desperate refuge, yet often powerless against despair. Eadric tries to hum a hymn, its melody a link to his village's church, where candlelight warmed his soul, but a prisoner's wild shriek breaks the tune, his voice dissolving into a sob. The darkness, the noise, the hunger make the heavens feel distant, his faith a flickering candle in a storm. The social isolation of the dungeon amplifies his mental collapse. The other prisoners, though close in their suffering, offer no solace. Their screams are a shared nightmare, not a bond. Eadric hears a man plead for his family, his voice echoing Alina's last words, "Come back to us," and the similarity is a knife to his heart, a reminder of what he's lost. The jailers, like Godric, are omnipotent, their footsteps a threat of torture or meager rations. Eadric flinches at the sound of boots, fearing a return to the rack or the glint of a heated iron. The feudal hierarchy, unyielding, renders him powerless, his peasant status making him prey to both despair and lords. Historical records, like the pipe rolls, describe prisoners confessing under psychological strain, their minds broken before their bodies. Eadric wonders if Aliana can plead his case, but the thought of her facing Lord Baldwin's court, alone and vulnerable, is a torment worse than hunger. The psychological breaking point is a calculated torment, as brutal as any physical wound. The darkness erases time, the screams steal rest, the rats and hunger erode strength, each horror feeding a cycle of despair. Eadric's mind teeters, his thoughts a jumble of fear and memory, his sense of self slipping. He imagines confessing, not because he's guilty, but to end the torment, to silence the screams, to escape the rat's bites. Medieval accounts note prisoners reaching this point, some scratching their own skin, others muttering to unseen figures, their sanity lost to the dungeon's weight. Eadric's fingers trace the cross, his prayers a whisper, but the dungeon's horror, torture, darkness, vermin, screams, starvation, close in, threatening to extinguish the last spark of his soul. As we leave Eadric here, chained in the dark, the screams echoing, the rats skittering, the hunger gnawing, his mind is a fragile thread stretched to breaking. His body wastes, his cough worsens, his wounds fester, each moment a step closer to collapse. Ahead lies the faint hope of survival, the struggle to endure, and the possibility of release. Each a challenge that seems impossible in this crucible of despair. His story is a testament to the dungeon's power to shatter the mind, a place where even the strongest falter under the weight of relentless torment. The dungeon beneath Lord Baldwin's fortress in 1300 CE England is a realm of unrelenting torment, a pit where hope suffocates under the weight of stone and despair. Eadric, a peasant accused of stealing grain to feed his starving family, has endured a day in this hellish crucible forged by the rack's brutal stretching. Thumbscrews crushing bite, the suffocating darkness that blinded him, rats gnawing at his flesh, screams of prisoners shredding his nerves, starvation hollowing his body, and a psychological torment that pushed his mind to the edge of collapse. His frame, once sturdy from ploughing fields, is now a map of scars, dislocated shoulders aching with every breath, a thumb swollen and useless, skin inflamed by flea bites, and ribs stark beneath his tattered tunic. The air, thick with the stench of rot, blood, and mold, clings to his lungs, his cough a rattling echo of the dungeon's filth. Rats skitter through the damp straw, their claws scraping like whispers of death, while the screams sharp with fresh agony or dull with madness linger in his ears. The foul water he sipped threatens fever, and the darkness has nearly erased Alina's face, his son's laughter a fading echo. Yet, as the iron door groans open, a faint glimmer of release beckons a miracle few prisoners knew. As you listen, from your quiet modern sanctuary, nestled in the warmth of your bed, let the dungeon's shadows fade, drawing you into Eadric's final moments and the enduring legacy of his ordeal. His story is a testament to human resilience, a reflection on a cruel past, and a gentle reminder of the comforts you hold tonight. Picture Eadric, if spared, emerging from the dungeon's depths, his steps faltering on the spiral stair, each movement a labor against his broken body. The torchlight, once a mocking sliver through the cell's grate, now burns his eyes, long accustomed to darkness, his vision blurred by hunger and pain. His wrists, raw from manacles, bleed as he steadies himself against the moss-lick walls. The air growing lighter but heavy with the memory of screams. The racks creak, the rats scuttle. Historical records, like the assize rolls of medieval England, reveal that few prisoners survive such dungeons, their bodies succumbing to disease, starvation, or torture, their fates often unrecorded. Those who emerged, as chronicled by writers like Matthew Paris, were mere husks, physically frail, mentally scarred, often shunned by their communities as omens of misfortune. Eadric, if he reaches the fortress's courtyard, would stumble into daylight, his skin ghostly pale, his frame wasted, his cough a harsh reminder of the dungeon's mouldy air. The villagers, gathered at the gates, might whisper, their eyes wary, seeing not the farmer they knew, but a spectre marked by suffering, his hands trembling, his gaze haunted by the horrors below. Eadric's return to his village, if it comes, is no joyous reunion. The path winds through familiar fields, the barley swaying golden under a sun that feels too bright, its warmth alien to his chilled bones. Aliana, waiting at their hut's door, cries out, her voice a mix of relief and anguish as she sees his emaciated frame, his bandaged thumb, the feverish glint in his eyes from a festering rat bite. Their son, clinging to her skirts, hesitates, his father's hollow cheeks and distant stare unfamiliar, a stranger in a body he once knew. Eadric's embrace is weak but desperate, his arms wrapping around them, his wooden cross pressed between their hearts, its edges worn smooth by countless prayers to Saint Cuthbert. Yet the dungeon's scars linger nightmares of the racks. Ropes tightening, the rat's claws on his skin, the screams that stole his sleep. Medieval accounts, such as those in the Chronicle of Lanercost, describe survivors haunted by such memories. Some unable to return to their fields, others ostracized, as cursed. Eadric's hands, once calloused from ploughing, shake as he touches Alina's face, his voice hoarse as he whispers her name. The dungeon's shadow a weight he'll carry for life. The historical legacy of medieval dungeons is one of cruelty and power, their horrors carved into the stone of castles like Pontefract York or the Tower of London. These were not prisons for rehabilitation, but instruments of feudal control, where lords and church officials used torture, darkness, and deprivation to enforce submission or extract confessions. Archaeological evidence, rusted chains bolted to cell walls, human bones marked by malnutrition, infection, and fractures reveals the human toll, a silent testament to lives erased by suffering. Chronicles like those of Geoffrey of Monmouth detail the fates of countless prisoners, their names lost, their pain a footnote to the grandeur of castles that stood above. Dungeons shaped modern perceptions of medieval justice, their brutality a stark contrast to today's ideals of fairness and humanity, their legacy a warning of the cost of unchecked power. Eadric's ordeal, though one man's story, echoes the thousands who languished in these cells, their screams and scratched prayers absorbed by the stone, their suffering a shadow beneath the castle's towering walls. Now tourist sites that belie the horrors they concealed. Eadric's survival, if granted, is a miracle, a fragile victory against odds designed to destroy. The rack's pain, the darkness's suffocating grip, the rat's festering bites, the prisoner's relentless screams, the hunger that hollowed his body, and the psychological torment that frayed his mind were all meant to break him. Yet he clung to Alina's memory, to his son's laughter, to the faint hope of St. Cuthbert's grace, each a thread that held him together when despair loomed. His scratched marks on the cell wall, a desperate tally of time, were acts of defiance, proof of his refusal to be erased. Archaeological finds, names, crosses, and prayers etched into dungeon walls show that prisoners often left such marks, small rebellions against a system that sought to crush them. Eadric's wooden cross, clutched through every torment, was his anchor, its worn edges a testament to a faith battered but unbroken, a link to a world beyond the dungeon's stone, where love and light still waited. Contrast Eadric's world with yours, dear listener, as you rest in the quiet of your room, the modern world a gentle hum around you. Your bed, soft and warm, is a far cry from the damp, rat-infested straw that cradled Eadric's pain. Your light switch banishes darkness with a flick, unlike the suffocating void that blinded him. Your kitchen holds food untainted by mold, water, clean and safe, free from the dungeon's gritty poison. The screams that haunted Eadric are absent here, replaced by the soft rhythm of your breath, perhaps the distant chirp of crickets or the hum of a fan. The horrors of medieval dungeon torture devices, vermin, starvation, and despair are confined to history's pages, their lessons enduring in the gratitude for your safety, your comfort, your freedom. Eadric's struggle, his body broken, his mind teetering, reminds us of the human cost of cruelty, the resilience it takes to survive, and the fragility of hope in the face of suffering. Reflect on Eadric's journey, a single day that stretched into an eternity of torment, the dungeon's horrors, its torture devices that racked his body, its darkness that stole his sight, its rat that gnawed his flesh, its screams that shredded his nerves, its starvation that hollowed his frame, and its psychological weight that nearly broke his soul were a test few could endure. Historical records estimate that most prisoners perished within days or weeks, their bodies succumbing to disease or their minds to madness, their fates unmarked by the lords who condemned them. Eadric's survival, if it comes, is a rare spark, a testament to the strength of love, faith, and the will to endure. His story, woven through the dungeon's terrors, is a mirror to our own capacity for resilience, a reminder to cherish the light, the warmth, the safety we hold so easily today. As we close this tale, imagine Eadric if spared sitting by his hut's hearth, Alina's hand in his, their son asleep beside them. The fire crackles, its warmth a balm to his chilled bones, its light a shield against the dungeon's darkness. The screams, the rats, the racks, pain linger in his nightmares, but Alina's touch, her voice, grounds him, a reminder of what he fought for. His cross, still tucked against his heart, bears the marks of his ordeal, its wood a silent witness to his survival. The village, with its barley fields and familiar rhythms, begins to heal him, though the scars physical and mental will never fully fade. His story, like those of countless others lost to history, is a whisper from the past, a call to remember the cost of cruelty and the power of endurance. Thank you, dear listener, for joining this journey into the shadows of a medieval dungeon, for walking with Eadric through a day that tested the limits of human strength. If his story stirred you, consider liking this video, subscribing for more historical tales, or sharing your thoughts in the comments. Perhaps tell us where you're listening from, your own corner of light in this modern world. As you settle deeper into your pillows, let the dungeon's horrors fade, replaced by the gentle rhythm of your breath, the quiet of your room. The rack, the rats, the screams, the darkness, they're gone, confined to history, leaving only the warmth of your present, the peace of your night. Let Eadric's tale slip into memory, a distant echo as you drift toward rest, safe in the knowledge that the dungeon's shadows cannot touch you here.